Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen had always known that her petite frame and youthful appearance would work against her in the military. At 32, she stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, with delicate features that made her look more like a college graduate than a decorated intelligence officer. But what people couldn't see from her appearance was the razor-sharp mind that had earned her 3 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple Hearts, and a position as one of the youngest female intelligence officers ever to reach her rank. The humid Virginia morning felt oppressive as Sarah made her way across the sprawling military base toward the briefing facility. She was dressed in her standard battle dress uniform, her rank insignia clearly visible on her chest, but she had learned over the years that many people simply didn't notice or chose to ignore the details that indicated her true position in the military hierarchy. As she approached the main entrance of the briefing facility, she noticed a group of Navy SEALs gathered near the entrance. Their muscular frames and confident postures, unmistakable even from a distance. They were clearly waiting for something or someone, their tactical gear suggesting they had just returned from a training exercise, or perhaps something more serious. Sarah had worked with Special Operations Forces many times throughout her career. Her expertise in military intelligence and her fluency in 6 languages had made her an invaluable asset for sensitive operations around the world. She had provided crucial intelligence that had saved countless lives and had been instrumental in several high-profile missions that would never be discussed in public. But as she walked past the group of SEALs, she could hear their conversation shifting. One of them, a tall man with broad shoulders and the kind of swagger that came from years of successful missions, caught sight of her approach. His eyes swept over her uniform dismissively, clearly not bothering to look closely at her rank or the ribbons adorning her chest. "Hey there, sweetheart," the SEAL called out loudly enough for his teammates and several other personnel in the area to hear. "You lost? The administrative building is back that way. This briefing is for actual military personnel only." The comment hit Sarah like a physical blow. But she had experienced this kind of treatment before. She kept walking, her chin held high. But the SEAL wasn't finished. His voice carried across the area as he continued his commentary. "I don't know why they keep sending desk jockeys to these operational briefings," he said to his companions, his voice dripping with condescension. "What's next? Are they going to start letting the coffee girls sit in on mission planning?" Sarah stopped walking. Something about the particular cruelty in his voice and the public nature of his humiliation triggered a response she rarely allowed herself. She turned slowly to face the group, her dark eyes meeting the SEAL's gaze directly. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its low volume. "I believe you're mistaken about who belongs in this briefing." The SEAL laughed, a harsh sound that drew even more attention from nearby personnel. "Listen, honey, I've been doing this for 12 years. I know military when I see it, and what I see is someone who probably handles paperwork and makes coffee. So why don't you run along and let the real warriors handle the important stuff?" What the SEAL didn't know was that Sarah Chen had spent the last 8 months embedded with insurgent groups in 3 different countries, gathering intelligence that had disrupted major terrorist operations. She had been shot twice, had survived an IED explosion that killed 2 members of her team, and had personally interrogated some of the most dangerous terrorists in U.S. custody. More importantly, what he didn't know was that at that very moment, 4 of the highest-ranking generals in the United States military were approaching the same building from the opposite direction. General Patricia Morrison, the first female 4-star general to head military intelligence operations, was leading the group. Beside her walked General Robert Hayes, a decorated combat veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. General Michael Rodriguez, who had overseen special operations for the past 6 years, and General David Kim, whose expertise in military strategy had shaped policy at the highest levels of government. Sarah had worked directly with all 4 generals on various classified operations. General Morrison had personally recommended Sarah for her most recent promotion and had been instrumental in getting her assigned to some of the most sensitive intelligence operations in recent military history. The respect these high-ranking officers had for Sarah was based on years of proven performance under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. "What seems to be the problem here?" Sarah asked the SEAL, her voice remaining calm despite the anger building inside her. "Are you suggesting that my rank and my orders to attend this briefing are somehow invalid? The SEAL's companions were beginning to look uncomfortable, but he seemed to interpret their discomfort as encouragement. He stepped closer to Sarah, his substantial frame towering over her small stature. Listen, little girl, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you're clearly out of your league here. This briefing is about real military operations, not whatever administrative nonsense you're used to dealing with. So why don't you save us all some time and head back to wherever you came from? By now, a crowd had gathered. Other military personnel had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation unfold. Some of them recognized Sarah and looked shocked at how she was being treated. But the hierarchical nature of military culture made it difficult for them to intervene directly. Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out her military identification card and her briefing orders. She held them out toward the SEAL, her hands steady, despite her racing heart. Perhaps you should take a closer look at these, she said quietly. And then you might want to reconsider your assessment of who belongs in this briefing. The SEAL glanced at the documents dismissively. I don't care what your paperwork says. I can tell just by looking at you that you don't belong here. You probably got these orders because someone needed to fill a diversity quota or something. Real military operations require real military personnel, not whatever you're supposed to be. It was at this moment that General Morrison and her colleagues rounded the corner and came into view of the gathering crowd. The four generals were deep in conversation about the upcoming briefing when they noticed the commotion near the building entrance. General Morrison was the first to recognize Sarah. Her eyes immediately assessed the situation, taking in Sarah's rigid posture, the documents in her hand, and the aggressive stance of the SEAL who was clearly confronting one of her most valuable officers. But before the generals could intervene, the SEAL made one final, devastating comment that would seal his fate and create a moment that would be remembered throughout the base for years to come. You know what your problem is? He said to Sarah, his voice loud enough to carry to the approaching generals. You think because you're wearing a uniform, you're automatically entitled to respect. But respect is earned, sweetheart. And from what I can see, you haven't earned anything except maybe a participation trophy. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt the familiar burn of injustice and humiliation, but she had been through too much and sacrificed too much to let this moment break her. She straightened her shoulders and prepared to respond when she heard a voice behind her that changed everything. Lieutenant Colonel Chen, General Morrison's voice cut through the crowd like a blade. I trust you're ready for our briefing? The effect was immediate and dramatic. The SEAL's face went white as he suddenly realized that the woman he had been mocking was not only a fellow officer, but held a rank significantly higher than his own. The crowd fell silent, and several people could be heard drawing sharp breaths as they recognized the approaching generals. But Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of what would become the most memorable moment in her military career. And quite possibly, the most embarrassing moment in the SEALs. The transformation in the atmosphere was instantaneous and absolute. The SEAL who had been so confident moments before now stood frozen, his face cycling through expressions of confusion, recognition, and growing horror as the implications of the situation began to dawn on him. General Morrison approached with the measured stride of someone accustomed to command, her three colleagues flanking her in a formation that spoke of years of working together at the highest levels of military leadership. Her eyes never left Sarah's face as she spoke, but her tone carried clearly to everyone within earshot. I trust that Navy SEAL wasn't giving you any trouble, Colonel, General Morrison said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made even seasoned veterans straighten their spines reflexively. We have some important matters to discuss before the briefing begins. The SEAL's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Lieutenant Colonel, the words echoed in his mind as he stared at Sarah with new eyes, finally taking in the details he had dismissed so casually moments before. The silver oak leaf on her collar that denoted her rank. The impressive array of ribbons on her chest that spoke of combat deployments and distinguished service. The confident way she carried herself despite her small stature. Ma'am, Sarah replied to General Morrison, her voice steady and professional. No trouble at all. I was just clarifying some misconceptions about who belongs in today's briefing. General Hayes stepped forward, his weathered face showing a mixture of respect and concern. Colonel Chen, I want to personally thank you again for the intelligence package you provided last month. The operation in Syria couldn't have succeeded without your work. The SEAL felt his knees go weak. Syria. He knew about that operation. Every special operations soldier knew about it. It had been a textbook success that had eliminated a major terrorist cell and rescued 6 American hostages. The intelligence that had made it possible had been gathered by someone working deep undercover for months in one of the most dangerous regions in the world. General Rodriguez joined the conversation, his voice carrying genuine warmth. Sarah, I've been meaning to tell you that the Joint Operations Board has approved your recommendation for the new intelligence protocols. Your experience in the field has given us insights we never would have had otherwise. Sarah nodded professionally, but inside she felt a surge of satisfaction. Not because of the vindication in front of the SEAL who had humiliated her, but because of the recognition from officers whose opinions she genuinely respected. These were men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting their country, and their acknowledgement meant more to her than any personal revenge ever could. The SEAL tried to back away quietly, hoping to disappear into the crowd before anyone noticed his retreat. But General Kim's sharp eyes caught the movement. Petty Officer Martinez, General Kim said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that stopped the SEAL in his tracks. I believe you have something to say to Lieutenant Colonel Chen. Quote, Martinez. The name felt foreign in his own mouth as he realized that this general knew who he was. But of course they would know. They were generals. They knew every significant person on this base, and his confrontation with one of their key intelligence officers would not go unnoticed. Martinez began. His usual confidence completely evaporated. I didn't realize. You didn't realize what? General Morrison asked, stepping closer. Her tone wasn't harsh, but there was steel beneath the surface. That a highly decorated officer who holds a rank 3 levels above your own might actually belong in a military briefing? The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the presence of 4 generals and the obvious tension in the scene. Sarah could see familiar faces among the spectators, colleagues who had worked with her over the years and who understood exactly what was happening. Martinez looked around desperately, as if seeking some escape from the situation he had created, but there was nowhere to run. His own teammates were staring at him with expressions of shock and embarrassment. They had known him to be arrogant before, but this level of public humiliation of a superior officer was beyond anything they had witnessed. Ma'am, Martinez stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead despite the morning coolness. I apologize. I made an error in judgment. An error in judgment, General Hayes repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling it? Sarah stepped forward slightly. Despite her anger at how she had been treated, she could see that Martinez was genuinely shaken. Her years of experience had taught her that sometimes the most powerful response was restraint rather than retaliation. General Hayes, she said quietly. I think Petty Officer Martinez was simply surprised to encounter someone he wasn't expecting. Perhaps we can chalk this up to a learning experience. But General Morrison wasn't quite ready to let the matter drop. Colonel Chen, while I appreciate your graciousness, I think there are some things that need to be said here. Petty Officer Martinez, you just spent the last 10 minutes publicly humiliating one of the most decorated intelligence officers in the United States military. Would you like to know some of the details of her service record? Martinez looked like he wanted to sink through the ground, but he managed to stammer out. Yes, ma'am. Lieutenant Colonel Chen has been deployed to 17 different countries over the past 8 years, General Morrison began, her voice carrying to the entire crowd. She has provided intelligence that has directly led to the capture or elimination of 43 high-value terrorist targets. She speaks 6 languages fluently and has successfully operated undercover in some of the most dangerous regions in the world. General Rodriguez picked up the narrative. Colonel Chen was personally responsible for the intelligence that prevented a major terrorist attack on American soil 2 years ago. An attack that would have killed hundreds of innocent civilians. The operation was so sensitive that it has never been publicly acknowledged. But I can tell you that she spent 4 months infiltrating a terrorist cell, risking her life every single day. The SEAL's face had gone from white to a sickly gray color. Every word felt like a physical blow, driving home the magnitude of his mistake. Around him, he could hear murmurs from the crowd as people began to understand exactly who Sarah Chen was and what she had accomplished. General Kim continued the devastating recital. She has been wounded in action 3 times, including once when she stayed behind to ensure that wounded Marines could be evacuated safely. She refused medical evacuation herself until every other wounded soldier was safely aboard the helicopter. But perhaps most relevant to today's situation, General Hayes added, is that Colonel Chen has worked directly with Special Operations Forces more than any other intelligence officer in recent memory. She has provided briefings to Navy SEAL teams, Army Rangers, and Marine Force recon units. Many of those operations would have been impossible without her intelligence support. Martinez felt sick. He had built his entire identity around being part of an elite military unit, and here he was being dressed down by 4 generals for disrespecting an officer whose contributions to special operations exceeded his own by orders of magnitude. Sarah watched the unfolding scene with mixed emotions. Part of her felt vindicated to see Martinez finally understanding who she was and what she had accomplished. But another part of her felt genuinely sorry for him. She knew what it was like to be publicly humiliated, and she wouldn't wish that experience on anyone. "Generals," she said quietly, "I think the point has been made. Perhaps we should focus on the briefing ahead of us." But General Morrison had one more thing to say. "Petty Officer Martinez, I want you to understand something. Colonel Chen could have you written up for insubordination right now. The way you spoke to her was completely unacceptable, and it reflects poorly not just on you but on your unit and your training. However, she's choosing to show you mercy. I suggest you think very carefully about how you conduct yourself in the future." Martinez managed to find his voice. "Ma'am, I owe Colonel Chen a sincere apology. I was completely wrong, and I'm sorry." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the arrogant SEAL who had mocked her, but a young soldier who had made a terrible mistake and was genuinely sorry for it. "Apology accepted. Petty Officer, we all have things to learn." The 4 generals exchanged glances, and Sarah could see that they were preparing to deliver one final lesson that would drive the point home beyond any doubt. What happened next would ensure that this moment became legendary throughout the base, a story that would be told for years as an example of why snap judgments about fellow service members could be so dangerous. General Morrison looked around at the assembled crowd and then back at Martinez. "Petty Officer, I think there's something else you need to understand about proper military protocol." Martinez nodded nervously, clearly bracing himself for whatever was coming next. "When you encounter a superior officer," General Morrison continued, "especially one of Colonel Chen's caliber and accomplishments, there are certain courtesies that are expected." The general's words hung in the air, and Sarah suddenly realized what was about to happen. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw all 4 generals beginning to move into formation. "In fact," General Morrison said, her voice carrying across the now silent crowd, "I think we should demonstrate the proper way to show respect to an officer like Colonel Chen." What happened next would become the most talked about moment in the history of the base, a scene so powerful and unexpected that it would be recounted in military academies and training facilities for decades to come. General Morrison stepped back and brought her right hand up in a crisp, perfect military salute. Her 3 colleagues immediately followed suit, creating a line of 4-star and 3-star generals, all rendering the highest military courtesy to Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen. The effect on the assembled crowd was electric. A collective gasp rose from the spectators as they witnessed something virtually unheard of in military protocol. Generals almost never saluted lower-ranking officers, regardless of their accomplishments. The gesture was so extraordinary, so unprecedented, that for a moment nobody seemed to know how to react. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. Despite her shock at the unexpected honor, she snapped to attention and returned the salute with the same precision and respect that had been shown to her. The moment stretched on for what felt like an eternity but was probably only 10 seconds, during which the only sound was the gentle Virginia breeze rustling through the trees surrounding the base. When the generals finally lowered their salutes, the silence was deafening. Martinez stood frozen, his mouth hanging open, as he tried to process what he had just witnessed. In his 12 years of military service, he had never seen anything like it. Generals didn't salute lieutenant colonels. It simply didn't happen. But here were 4 of the highest-ranking officers in the United States military, demonstrating their profound respect for a woman he had dismissed as a desk jockey just minutes before. General Morrison was the first to speak, her voice carrying clearly in the stillness. "Colonel Chen, it has been an honor serving alongside you. Your dedication and sacrifice have made all of us better officers and better Americans." General Hayes nodded in agreement. "Sarah, when I think about the future of our military, I think about officers like you. You represent everything we hope to achieve in terms of excellence, integrity, and commitment to the mission." General Rodriguez stepped forward slightly. "Colonel, your work in the intelligence field has redefined how we approach modern warfare. The lives you've saved and the operations you've made possible will never be fully counted, but they will never be forgotten." General Kim's words carried a weight that seemed to settle over the entire crowd. "In my 40 years of military service, I have rarely encountered an officer whose contributions have been as significant and far-reaching as yours. You embody the best of what American military service represents." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. These were officers she had looked up to throughout her career, leaders whose decisions affected global security and whose opinions shaped military policy at the highest levels. To receive this kind of recognition from them was beyond anything she had ever imagined. "Thank you, sirs," she managed to say, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt. "It has been my privilege to serve under your leadership and alongside the finest soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines in the world." The crowd began to stir as the immediate drama of the moment passed, but the impact was far from over. Martinez remained rooted in place, his face a study in shock and mortification. His teammates looked equally stunned, some of them staring at him with expressions that ranged from embarrassment to outright anger. One of the other SEALs, a senior chief who had served with Martinez for several years, stepped forward and spoke quietly but firmly. "Pete, you need to make this right." Martinez nodded slowly, seeming to come out of his trance. He approached Sarah with hesitant steps, his usual swagger completely absent. When he reached her, he came to attention and rendered his own salute, holding it until she returned the gesture. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I want to apologize not just for my words, but for my complete failure to recognize your service and your sacrifice. I have no excuse for my behavior, and I am deeply sorry." Sarah studied his face for a moment, seeing genuine remorse and understanding in his eyes. "Petty Officer Martinez, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them and how we conduct ourselves going forward." Martinez nodded gratefully. "Ma'am, if there's anything I can do to make amends for my behavior, please let me know." General Morrison interjected, her tone suggesting that Martinez's education wasn't quite complete. "Actually, Petty Officer, there is something you can do. I think it would be valuable for you to attend today's briefing as an observer. Colonel Chen will be presenting intelligence that your unit may need to act on in the future. It might give you some insight into the kind of work she does." Martinez looked surprised but nodded immediately. "Yes, ma'am. I would be honored to attend." As the crowd began to disperse and move toward the briefing facility, the conversations that erupted were animated and filled with wonder. People who had witnessed the scene were already retelling it to those who had missed it, and the story was growing with each telling. Inside the briefing room, Sarah took her position at the front of the room where she would present her intelligence findings to the assembled military leadership. The room was packed with officers from various branches of service, special operations personnel, and intelligence specialists. Martinez sat in the back, still looking somewhat shell-shocked from his earlier encounter. As Sarah began her presentation, it became immediately clear why the generals held her in such high regard. Her briefing was masterful, combining detailed intelligence analysis with practical operational recommendations. She spoke with authority about terrorist networks, regional politics, and security threats, in ways that demonstrated not just academic knowledge, but hard-won experience in the field. She detailed recent intelligence-gathering operations in 3 different countries, explaining how seemingly unrelated pieces of information had been assembled into a comprehensive picture of emerging terrorist threats. Her recommendations for military response were precise, well-reasoned, and based on an intimate understanding of both the intelligence and the capabilities of various military units. Martinez found himself taking notes, fascinated despite himself by the depth and complexity of Sarah's knowledge. Every few minutes, she would reference some detail that she had personally observed, or some contact she had developed during her undercover work. It became increasingly clear that her intelligence wasn't theoretical or second-hand. She had risked her life repeatedly to gather the information she was presenting. When she discussed the Syrian operation that General Hayes had mentioned earlier, Martinez realized that he had actually participated in that mission. The intelligence briefing his unit had received before the operation had been delivered by a different officer, but now he understood that the crucial information had come from Sarah's months of dangerous undercover work. As the briefing concluded, the room erupted in questions and discussions about operational details. Sarah fielded each question with expertise and patience, demonstrating a breadth of knowledge that impressed even the most experienced officers in attendance. When the formal session ended, several officers approached Sarah to discuss specific aspects of her intelligence findings. Martinez watched from his seat in the back, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his earlier mistake. General Morrison noticed Martinez sitting alone and approached him. "Well, petty officer, what did you think of Colonel Chen's briefing?" Martinez stood quickly and came to attention. "Ma'am, it was extraordinary. I had no idea. I mean, the depth of her knowledge and experience is incredible. I feel like an idiot for how I treated her." The general's expression softened slightly. "The important thing is that you understand now. Colonel Chen is one of our most valuable assets, and officers like her are the reason our special operations missions succeed. Your unit has benefited from her work more times than you probably realize." As Martinez left the briefing facility, he found himself thinking about the events of the morning. His teammates were waiting for him outside, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and concern. "Dude, what the hell were you thinking?" one of them asked. "Do you realize what just happened in there?" Martinez nodded slowly. "Yeah. I think I'm beginning to understand. I screwed up. Big time." Word of the incident spread quickly throughout the base and beyond. Within hours, the story of the Navy SEAL who had mocked a decorated lieutenant colonel, only to watch 4 generals salute her in response, had become legendary. Social media posts from people who had witnessed the event or heard about it secondhand began circulating, though the specific details of Sarah's classified work remained protected. For Sarah, the day represented more than just personal vindication. It was a reminder of why she had chosen to serve her country and why the work she did mattered. The respect shown by the generals wasn't just for her personally, but for the intelligence community as a whole, and for the vital role that often went unrecognized. In the days that followed, Martinez made it a point to learn more about intelligence operations and the officers who conducted them. He requested additional training and volunteered for assignments that would give him a better understanding of how intelligence and special operations work together. The incident also sparked broader discussions on the base about respect, assumptions, and the danger of judging fellow service members based on appearance or preconceived notions. Training sessions were organized to help personnel better understand the various roles and specialties within the military, and the story of Sarah and Martinez became a case study in leadership development programs. Months later, when Martinez was deployed on a particularly dangerous mission, he found himself relying on intelligence that had been gathered and analyzed by Sarah's team. As he reviewed the detailed briefing materials that would keep him and his teammates safe, he thought about that morning when he had dismissed her as a desk jockey. The mission was a complete success, with no casualties and all objectives achieved. As Martinez wrote his after-action report, he made sure to note the critical importance of the intelligence support they had received. He didn't know if Sarah would ever see the report, but he wanted it on record that her work had directly contributed to the safety and success of his team. The story of that morning became part of base folklore, told and retold whenever new personnel arrived, or whenever someone needed a reminder about the importance of treating fellow service members with respect. The image of 4 generals saluting a lieutenant colonel, became a powerful symbol of how true leadership recognizes and honors excellence, regardless of rank or appearance. For Sarah, the memory of that day served as a source of strength during difficult times. Whenever she faced new challenges or felt discouraged by the obstacles in her path, she remembered the moment when her service and sacrifice had been recognized by the highest levels of military leadership. The incident also marked a turning point in her career. The public recognition from the generals led to new opportunities and assignments, eventually resulting in her promotion to full colonel and her appointment to positions of even greater responsibility within the intelligence community. Years later, when Sarah reached the rank of general herself, she made it a priority to recognize and support other officers whose contributions might be overlooked or undervalued. She never forgot the power of that moment when 4 generals had chosen to honor her service, and she was determined to pay that respect forward to the next generation of military leaders. The morning that had started with humiliation and disrespect had transformed into one of the most meaningful and powerful experiences of her military career, proving once again that true leadership consists not in demanding respect for oneself, but in ensuring that respect is given where it is due.